Just before you start, Dennis, I would just like to bring something up. So there's often the case and the reason when we were discussing with governments that they are competing with each other, who is building more coal and who is not, to somehow dominate the energy sector in the region. In the case of Kosovo, when Kosovo was talking to the government by providing arguments and reasonable analysis, they were saying, look at the Bosnians because they're building and they're building with Chinese money and there's no one is watching them and so on. So do you see that as a case in the region where countries are fighting to dominate the energy sector by investing more in fossil fuels and coal, or is that something, because then we go back to renewables investments with the feed-in tariffs and stuff, and we see that there's also corruption and criminal issues involved in there as well. So how do you see this whole situation in the Western Balkans, and what could help to go towards an energy transition in the region?
Okay. Yeah, the thing is that, yeah, the only new coal power plant in the region was built in Bosnia, and it's the case of Stanari. It was put online, I think, some 2 years ago, and it was the case where you had a private investor from abroad coming in with the loan from the Chinese banks and Chinese companies and building a new, completely new coal power plant in Bosnia. That was built for the, again? Okay. Okay, so that that was a private interest, so that had nothing to do with the actual state plans or whatever. As I said, it's a private investment with Chinese money. Talking about Bosnia and Bosnia in the region being the only, I think, net exporter of energy, it's not so much a competition between the countries who is going to invest more and who is going to sell more. It's more of the logic of having their own energy. So the problem we have in these countries is everyone wants to have their own energy source, to be 100% energy sufficient within their borders, which in reality cannot work. So that's where we have a problem, and yeah, of course, they would all love to export, and they justify the new investments by having this possibility to export it, because, well, our politicians usually claim that the energy sector is the backbone of Bosnian economy, which makes absolutely no sense. It should support the Bosnian economy, not be the backbone of the Bosnian economy. But that's what they do, and of course, yeah, they have some money from the exports. That's it. Yeah, yeah, I'll move there because I have to find the presentation. Yeah. There. How do you put it? Yes. Okay, this will be, because I assume that my colleagues will talk about the economy and the coal and transition and everything. I thought it would be a good idea actually to present why we need that urgently, what is happening on the field, and that it's not really just the question of energy transition, economy, and money. It's actually a question of human lives. Because this is Tuzla, my hometown, during the winter. And this is a photo from last winter, basically, where you see down somewhere in that fog and smoke from the electricity plant is a town, completely covered with smog. And this is the electricity plant we are talking about. It's more or less built within the town limits. So it's maybe 3-4 kilometers from the center of town. So basically in the urban area, you have an electricity plant where the youngest block was built some 40 years ago. So it's an old Russian or Polish technology where actually they did not install quite a bit of pollution prevention measures. So this is how it looks occasionally. Even during the summer we have the smoke going out. So because people claim it's just during the winter that the pollution is there. No, it's there during the summer also. And these are some statistics on the actual coal mines and coal mining in Bosnia. So we have some 7 million tons of coal, out of which 85% is burned in 2 coal power plants. Just the Tuzla plant emits between 50 and 70,000 tons of SO2, because the situation we have in the Balkans, it's not just specific for Bosnia, it's also all over the Balkans, is that none of the old coal power plants has installed the desulfurization equipment, which is something quite strange for Europe because you don't have a problem like that. But when we have done the analysis and we brought an expert from Europe, he was simply astonished that there is something like this happening on the ground. Beside that, we have the CO2 emissions, which is almost 4 million tons of CO2. But that will be interesting later on. This is the analysis we have done back in 2013 with this expert from Europe, where we calculated basically that on an annual level, the health costs caused by the pollution, just air pollution, from the electricity plant in Tuzla come up to 99 million euros a year. This was done back in 2013. Nothing has changed in the last 5-6 years. So up to now, population from that area has actually subsidized the price of electricity up to €500 million by paying their bills for health costs, or the companies which lost working days or whatever when the workers were actually sick because of this air pollution. Not to mention the lives, because, I mean, people are dying because of this. This is the actual graph that shows the SO2 limits between 2010 and 2017, where the annual limit is 50 micrograms per cubic meter. As you can see, most of the time, the limits are above. The values are above this limit, and they go up to 800 micrograms. That's the daily average, meaning that hourly average could go even beyond 1,000 or higher. So here you have the overview of the actual times the limits, hourly limits were breached in this period. And just to clarify why there is a difference between 2012, 13, 14, and the following years, these are the values which were actually calculated based on the validated measurements done by the monitoring stations. In these first 3 years, the measuring stations were not really measuring properly, so we didn't have all the valid data. And even in the following years, we don't have the data for every day in the year. But you can see that actually, according to our law, which we have on that, this should be breached, the limit should be breached 24 times a year. And, well, the record is 2016 with 704 times a year. There were absolutely no reactions from the authorities. There were no measures done. Nothing was stopped. Transport was going on. All the factories were working, so no reaction from the authorities. The same thing we have with the PM pollution, particulate matter, where you have it almost, well, constantly present, of course higher during the winters. This is December, well, this is actually January, where I think there was 1 or 2 days where we didn't have this limit value breached. So the whole month we were just suffering from this and no reaction again. So after that, even We are talking about, well, our authorities are claiming that they're going to build a new coal power plant, which is going to replace the 2 old blocks, 3 and 4, and that would actually solve the problem of pollution, which is, yeah, acceptable to a certain level. I mean, it would reduce the pollution. But the thing is, that's why I mentioned the CO2 emissions. They're trying to replace 2 blocks with, of 300 megawatts with 1 block of 450 megawatts. So they would probably reduce the pollution of sulfur dioxide, NOx, and PM, but they would increase the emissions of CO2 emissions for, well, they will almost double. Well, one and a half times they would increase the CO2 emissions. So that has nothing to do with decarbonization of the energy system, basically. But to forget about the air pollution, we have a huge problem with the actual ash disposal sites of the electricity plant in Tuzla. We have done 2 studies, one where we have analyzed the presence of heavy metals in food, soil, water, human hair, sediments, and whatever. And the other one was based on the actual previous studies. We actually had a health impact study where we interviewed the population living around these areas where they dispose the ash, and we had some findings where in the first study we found that there is a huge presence of arsenic, cadmium, chrome, and nickel in most of the samples. And in some cases, we also found mercury in the sediment. And the problem is that we have proof by using the hair samples, we have proved that it ended up through whatever, be it food, water, or even breathing, it ended up in humans. So we have cases with human samples that contain arsenic, cadmium, and lead. The conclusion of the health study actually linked the presence of these heavy metals with the various diseases in that area. And in some cases, at the end of this thing, you see Divkovići, Plane, Bukinje, and I don't know. Those are the villages located around the ash disposal sites, where 41% of the cases, for example, in Divkovići, could be linked, be it death or cancer or whatever, can be linked with the pollution from the ash disposal sites. The problem there is this is the active ash disposal site of PPT Tuzla. Here in the back is actually Tuzla town. They've used a valley, which forests and everything, agricultural land. They've built a dam, and they're dumping the ash here. And this is how it looks. So one would think that it's a nice beach with blue water and somewhere in the Caribbean. And basically, this color is coming from all the chemicals and heavy metals which are present in this water. They use this water basically to transport the ash, like this. So as you can see, there's absolutely no prevention of this water penetrating the underground water. There are no liners. There's absolutely nothing there to prevent it polluting the underground water, the wells in the surrounding area, or whatever, and they claim that that's the European way. They claim, I mean, we have the statement from the company stating that's how it's done in Europe, in following that European practice. I'm not sure that this is the best European way and practice. So, just one more slide. This is what happens when a living creature ends up in that water. It's dying, basically.
No, it's a hornet.
And I'm sorry, just one thing. This is what happens with the forest. Again, dying. It's there. Best European standard. And the problem there also we have is when the surface of this ash disposal site dries out, you have wind picking up the dust. So everything that they've collected in filters and whatever, preventing the air pollution by installing some of the filters, all that ends up at the ash disposal site. When it dries out, you have, whoops, no, you have nothing. So all this dust actually ends in the surrounding villages, basically killing the people from that area. And going also into Tuzla town, because as I said, Tuzla is just behind this hill. So that's the problem we have in Tuzla.
Thank you. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I mean, these images are very disturbing, so please do not let human beings get into the water,
Well, that's
because
the reality.
we know what, but we're actually getting it indirectly. So again, just before I open the panel for questions and answers, there's an urgent need to actually treat the Western Balkans not as a corridor in the energy sector, but to do something in the Western Balkans, so we're an integral part of planning and strategizing towards accession into the EU. So thank you, all three of you, for your in-depth analysis, and I think we have time for 2 or 3 questions, I would say, from the audience. So please, whoever wants to ask something, you're free. No questions or comments, at least from what you have seen or heard. Yes, we have a gentleman.
Yeah, my question is on the Chinese power plant. Who were the investors? Were they local investors who got the money from the Chinese, or was it a kind of Chinese-initiated construction?
Well, it was a businessman from the area, which has a company, I think, registered somewhere in UK. And he got the loan from the Chinese banks, and the Chinese company actually built the electricity plant. So that's also something which should be actually mentioned here. Our authorities are claiming that these investments are the biggest investments, well, in Bosnia after the war or whatever, where it will boost the local economy. First of all, they are not, well, biggest Chinese investments, that's what they say. First of all, they are not Chinese investments, they're Chinese loans. And these loans are very conditioned, because that loan in the text says that at least 80%, I think, don't quote me on that, but roughly 80% of the money has to go back in one way or the other to the Chinese companies. So you have a situation with this plant where all the equipment was imported from China and installed by Chinese workers. So you had some 400 to 500 Chinese workers living at the building site, constructing the plant. So that's how they function. So it has nothing to do with boosting local economy. It has nothing to do with boosting local market, labor market. And, well, in this case, it was a private investment. But in the other cases, it would be the state-owned thing, where the state would guarantee for that loan. So at the end, when we do not pay off the loan, the people of the country will have to pay that loan. Okay?
Thank you. Any other questions? Please.
Ivana Mijatovic, DG Climate Action. Well, this is not a question, it's more of a comment, and it does not really relate to energy investments or climate targets, but more to environmental acquis, and because you are a candidate country, potential candidate country, you are under obligation to align with the acquis. So what we saw here is just, something that it's liable under the environmental impact assessment. And basically, you need to have a permit and you need to align with a permit. So I would think, environmental authorities, environmental inspection, because this is not how you do it in the EU. I mean, this would be closed down immediately and lost a permit.
Thank you.
Just to reply on that. The fact is that when we send complaints to the inspections, they claim that everything is under the actual permit. And in this particular case, for this ash disposal site, the actual environmental permit has expired in May this year and was not renewed yet. So they've been working without an valid environmental permit for the last, 6 months? And nothing happened. At one point, the ministry issued some kind of a document stating, okay, they're supposed to work under the conditions of the previous permit until they get the new one. It's an official document. And you saw the conditions on that site, so.
Thank you. Please.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm Elizabeth George from DG NEAR, and I'm wondering, with the rise of private investments, particularly from China, is there a push, or has it opened up discussions for nationalizing or creating some kind of measures to draw some limits to dubious projects of this type? Thank you.
Seems like China is a hot topic right now, so, and Bosnia.
Yeah, okay. As I said, just to clarify, it's not private investments from China. We are talking about loans from China. China has lots of money, lots of equipment produced, and lots of people, well, workers to work on that, to export everything. So they're exporting money, labor, and equipment. And we are going to pay these loans. You know, so it's not private investments. Sometimes, well, in the case of Stanari, yeah, it was a private investment with the Chinese money. But in other cases, we are talking about the state-owned companies which are planning to build new blocks of existing or new coal power plants, where they are going to ask for loans which they would guarantee with the budget of the country, so with our money.
Yeah. One more?
If I may, as members of the energy community, I think there's an obligation to create national emission reduction plans on sulfur, NOx, particulate matter, etc. Is this somehow influencing the situation on the ground, or is it just, let's say, for the future?
Well, if I may just go here. So often the cases that the obligations that derive from the Secretariat have not been taken seriously by member states in the Western Balkans. Thus, they have not fulfilled what the obligations that they were supposed to. And this, again, the national emission standards and the schemes have not been taken quite seriously also from member states in this case. That's why we wanted a stronger political support from the Commission through the Secretariat, which somehow could link the progress of these countries towards the accession strategy. And this is something we haven't seen in this case, and this is something that we are trying to send a strong political message to the Commission to take this into consideration when they negotiate and discuss with the member states on the accession strategy. Please.
Okay, in our case, we have the National Emissions Reduction Plan in Bosnia. It was adopted. And unfortunately, even though it's a good one, it's within the framework of NERP and everything, the authorities are using that as an excuse not to install desulfurization equipment immediately, because they're now following, or they're referring to the deadlines which are listed in the NERP. So basically, NERP is now being used by them to prolong the process of installing some of the equipment, because they say our obligation is to do it by 2023 or 27 or whatever. You know, so they're using that just to save time.
So I will round up the panel, if I may just reinforce 2-3 messages what have been said here. So going back to political shift, there's clearly a need for our politicians to shift their mindset towards a sustainable future for our countries. When they draft their energy and climate policies and strategies, we clearly see lack of consideration for environment and air pollution and so on, or as often the case, we have strategies which lack implementation as well. So we need to work on that. Two is the transition towards renewables and energy efficiency needs to happen, but it needs to be seen from a regional perspective. And in order to do that, we need the Western Balkan countries to work together in order to implement something like that. The demand side was also mentioned here as something that we need to take into consideration when we plan for new energy sources, which we need to tackle efficiency first before we move on with any production facilities. So again, back to the EU, as we invite them to play a more crucial role on this whole strategy that we are demanding from them, to be stronger and be quite straightforward in demands towards the member states in the Western countries to fulfill their obligations and shift towards a decarbonization pathway. Thank you everyone for listening, and I hope we were able to give you a brief overview and summary on the three Western Balkan countries which are suffering from fossil fuel investments and air pollution and so on.
Fossil fuel addiction.
Addiction. Mirjana says addiction, so yeah.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you very much. It was very, I think it was very lively, and it showed not just on an abstract level what's happening in Western Balkan, and exactly this was our intention, to bring pictures and real stories. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your contribution. And as Vizar said, obviously we are here just to show what EU and Western Balkan and Ukraine, the energy community, can do for each other. And now I'm calling Alexander Matura. We are still waiting and expecting Mr. Kopac to arrive, who is the director of the Energy Community Secretariat. But now I have the nice, how to say, obligation to introduce Alexander Matura, who has been in the renewable and sustainable energy business for quite some time. I think we can say that nearly 15 years. So he has a lot to say about the region as such, and we are going to hear from him about the structural problems and the structural obstacles, the structural weaknesses and opportunities laid out by the energy community and the European Union in this manner for Western Balkan, since we, in the first part